We usually think of memory as something private, something stored inside individual minds. But think about your earliest memories. How many of them come entirely from you? How many were shaped by stories you were told, photographs you were shown, moments your family repeated so often that they became part of how you remember yourself? At a certain point, memory stops looking like a record and starts looking like a negotiation. It becomes difficult to separate what you directly remember from what you learn to remember collectively. And that raises a deeper question. What if memory is never entirely individual to begin with? If that's true, then memory isn't just personal. It's one of the main ways societies hold themselves together. In previous videos, we explored the idea that identity is not a fixed object. It is a braid across time, a weaving together of memory of the past, interpretation of the present, and anticipation of the future. But if identity depends on temporal integration, then memory cannot simply be storage. It has to help regulate continuity across time. Not just what happened, but what remains meaningful. Memory is not a place the past goes. It is a process that keeps a life continuous. This is why memory changes. Not because the brain is malfunctioning, but because memory is adaptive. As your present changes, the meaning of the past changes with it. A breakup changes how you reinterpret earlier moments in a relationship. A political transformation changes how societies reinterpret their history. A traumatic event can reorganize the emotional structure of entire decades of memory. The past does not physically change, but its integration does. We often treat changing memory as distortion. But from an integrative perspective, change is not the problem. Rigidity is. We often speak as if there were two separate kinds of memory. Individual memory, what happens inside a person, and collective memory, the stories societies tell. But that split becomes unstable very quickly, because individual memories are never formed in isolation, and collective memory does not exist independently of individuals. Memory is always already relational, because identity is always already relational. In the identity video, I argued that we never weave our lives alone. Our braids cross. The language we inherit, the stories we are told, the expectations placed upon us, the futures we are encouraged or discouraged from imagining, all shape who we become. Memory participates in those same relations. Your memories are reinforced, challenged, organized, and interpreted through other people. And collective memory only exists through countless acts of individual reconstruction, transmission, repetition, and revision. So the distinction between individual and collective memory is useful analytically, but it becomes misleading when treated as absolute. They are different levels of the same relational process. Family stories, national commemorations, institutional archives. These are all places where individual and collective reconstruction continuously shape one another. Memory does not simply preserve the past. It helps regulate relationships across time. Memory binds, aligns, filters, and carries meaning forward across time. It stabilizes identities, coordinates groups, maintains continuity, and determines what remains meaningful enough to carry forward. This is why memory is tied so closely to belonging. Families maintain memory, communities maintain memory, nations maintain memory, not only to preserve information, but to preserve coherence across time. And this is where power enters the picture, because memory is never only about preservation. It is also about selection. Which events are repeated, which experiences become recognizable, which narratives become institutionalized, which perspectives are amplified, which disappear. Over time, those selections begin to feel natural rather than chosen. Power does not completely determine memory, but it strongly shapes what becomes collectively stabilized across time. It helps determine what becomes difficult to forget and what becomes easy to ignore. And because memory shapes identity, power also shapes what kinds of identities remain possible. To shape memory is to shape what counts as the past, what feels continuous in the present, and what futures remain imaginable. This is why struggles over memory are never only about the past. They are also struggles over the future. What a society chooses to remember changes what it can recognize, what it can integrate, and what trajectories it can sustain. This also helps explain trauma. Trauma is not simply remembering something painful. All meaningful experiences continue shaping the present and future. The difference is that traumatic experiences resist integration. A traumatic event remains unresolved within the larger continuity of a life. Instead of becoming part of the braid, it repeatedly interrupts it. The past erupts into the present because the mind continues trying to integrate something that feels too important to ignore, but too destabilizing to fully absorb. From this perspective, trauma is not simply memory preserved. It is memory demanding integration. And this can happen collectively as well as individually. Societies can carry unresolved traumas, histories that repeatedly return because they were never adequately integrated into collective understanding. Not forgotten, but unresolved. This is one reason literature and the arts matter so much. They do not simply represent memory, they help reorganize it. A novel, a film, a testimony, a memorial can suddenly allow experiences to become interpretable in new ways. They can reopen histories that had been narrowed, reintegrate voices that had been excluded, expand what a society can collectively hold together. They expand the interpretive bandwidth of a society, allowing previously incompatible memories to coexist. This is why authoritarian systems are so concerned with controlling narratives, because controlling memory helps stabilize identity across time. From a PHET perspective, memory is not retrieval from a fixed archive. It is an ongoing process of temporal integration. The past is continuously reconstructed from the perspective of the present and in relation to anticipated futures. And because those reconstructions happen relationally, memory is never fully individual and never fully collective. It emerges across the crossings. This matters because memory does not only shape what we know, it shapes what we can recognize, what we can become, and what futures remain possible. A society that narrows memory narrows temporal possibility. A society that expands what it can remember, including contradiction, difference, and previously excluded experience, expands its integrative capacity. So memory is not simply about preserving the past. It is about regulating continuity across time, across persons, across institutions, across generations. And the question is not only what happened, but what kind of futures become possible depending on how the past is reconstructed. We often imagine memory as something behind us, but memory is also one of the ways we move forward, because the past is never integrated once and for all. It is continuously rewritten through the changing relationships between past, present, and future. And because we never weave our identities alone, memory is never only personal. Just as identity is woven together across time, memory helps keep the weave intact. It is part of the relational fabric through which societies hold together or begin to fracture. If you'd like to follow where this goes, consider subscribing. I am, therefore I think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.